They mocked the man who swept their floors, not knowing he owned the house they lived in, and when his real name was spoken, every laugh in that mansion died in silence.
They mocked the man who swept their floors, calling him slow, calling him useless, a shadow meant only to serve. Every warning, he bowed his head and said nothing. He moved quietly, wiping their fingerprints from gold handles, polishing marble that once echoed his own footsteps. They thought he was invisible, but they didn't know that the house they lived in, the walls they leaned on, and even the air of comfort they breathed belonged to him. He heard every insult. He watched every lie. He saw how people changed when they believed no one of power was watching. And yet, he never spoke. He smiled when they mocked his accent. He nodded when they barked orders. He stayed, not out of weakness, but to see something that money could never buy. Because behind those shining chandeliers and fancy dinners, he wanted to know who was real and who only knelt to wealth. They didn't know the man they dismissed was testing hearts, watching loyalties, studying pride. They didn't know the quiet one among them was writing a story that would one day rewrite their names in shame. The day his truth surfaced, it didn't just break their pride, it burned it to ashes. But what happened before that day? What he discovered inside his own mansion is something no amount of power could prepare him for. If you love stories that twist power, pride, and fate, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. In Lagos, the city never sleeps. The air hums with music, traffic, and money. At night, the skyline glitters like spilled gold, and behind those tall glass towers live people who measure life in luxury and secrets. Among them was Chief Adewale Okonkwo, a man whose name opened doors before he even knocked. His face was on magazine covers, his parties drew governors, and his private jet was said to smell of imported roses. People spoke of him like a legend, the kind of man who had it all: power, fame, and a smile that could buy silence. But wealth has its cracks, and even gold can hide rust. One night, at a dinner meant to celebrate his empire, a whisper reached his ear. Someone close had betrayed him. The same hands that toasted his success had stolen from him. That night, something in him changed. He stopped hearing the applause. He started hearing the truth behind it. Lagos saw him as untouchable, but in his heart, he felt trapped, surrounded by bodyguards, yet alone. So he vanished. No press release, no goodbye, no warning. The mansion lights went dark, his convoy disappeared, and rumors filled the city like smoke. Some said he fled after losing his fortune. Others said he was dead. But the truth? He was closer than anyone imagined. In the quiet of his own estate, behind the same golden gates that once kept the world out, Chief Adewale returned in the plain white uniform of a house servant. No one recognized him. The same staff who once bowed before him now walked past without greeting. He mopped the floors he had once walked on in Italian shoes. He scrubbed the tables where presidents once dined. Every day, he watched how people treated the man they thought was nothing. The women gossiped in the kitchen, laughing about how the new help moved too slow. The madame, proud and polished, tossed him orders without ever looking him in the eye. To them, he was invisible, but he was learning. Every insult was a lesson, every cruel word a mirror of who they really were. He wasn't there for revenge. He wanted to see what people did when they thought no one important was watching. But what he discovered inside his own mansion was more than pride and cruelty. It was something that would tear through every layer of his disguise. Because one morning, as the sun hit the gold frames of his old photographs, He heard his name whispered, his real name, from a voice that shouldn't have known it. Who was watching him while he thought he was the one watching? Each morning, Adewale rose before the sun, the world still quiet, the city outside still sleeping. The uniform on his back smelled of soap and iron, stiff and strange against skin that once was silk. He cleaned the same marble floors that once reflected his designer shoes. Now they reflected a man no one looked at twice. The madame of the house, his wife's cousin, ran things with a sharp tongue and a cold stare. She was beautiful, but her beauty carried venom. She liked to remind the workers who was in charge, and she liked it even more when they flinched.
One morning, she called him lazy because the floors weren't shining enough. When he bowed to answer, she poured her unfinished wine on the clean tiles and said, "Now, start again." He said nothing. He just watched the red wine crawl across the marble like blood. Around him, the other staff turned away, pretending not to see. Fear had trained them to stay silent. She liked when people feared her. He remembered that once, she feared him too. Days passed, and the madame's words grew sharper. She whispered about him to her friends during afternoon visits, calling him uneducated, saying he was only fit to carry trees. They laughed. Their laughter echoed through the same halls where presidents once walked. Adewale kept working, every movement slow, controlled, calm. He wasn't there to fight her. He was there to learn. In the nights, when everyone slept, he wandered the mansion quietly. He saw papers left on the tables, receipts, signatures, decisions being made in his absence. His name was still on them, yet someone else was signing for him. His betrayal wasn't in his company alone. It had reached his home. He found out that the madame had been meeting with one of his top executives, the same man who had stolen from his company. They met in secret, smiling, sharing wine, talking about how the old man had finally fallen. She believed the fortune was gone, that he had vanished in shame. They didn't know he was the one sweeping the very room where they plotted. The more he watched, the more he realized it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about hunger. Everyone around him wanted something: control, money, recognition, and in their desire they had forgotten something he was just beginning to remember: humility. Then one afternoon, while serving tea, he heard the madame say something that stopped his breath. She told her friends that even if the old billionaire returned, she would never bow again. "He might have the money," she said, "but I hold the power now." Her friends nodded, laughing, unaware that the man she spoke of was standing just 3 feet away, holding their cups with steady hands. That night, he sat in the servants' quarters staring through the small window. For the first time, he felt something heavier than anger. It wasn't pain for what he lost. It was pain for what people became when they thought no one was watching. But then came the whisper again, the same voice that once said his real name. This time, it spoke close to his ear, too close to be a dream. "Chief, they are watching you too." Who could know who he truly was? That afternoon, the sun spilled through the wide windows, washing the marble floors in gold. The madame sat with her friends, their laughter soft but cutting. Adewale stood a few steps away, holding a silver tray, pretending not to hear. But their words came clear, sharper than glass. "That new house boy, he'll never be anything in life. Some people are born to serve." They laughed again, sipping tea sweet enough to hide their bitterness. He looked down, eyes still, face calm. Inside him, something heavy turned. He had been called many things in his life, but never this. He remembered a boy who once sold oranges by the roadside, barefoot, his shirt torn at the neck. He saw his mother's face again, tired, beautiful, wise. She used to tell him that a man's worth wasn't in what he wore, but in what he gave. He could still hear her voice in the heat of those Lagos afternoons, saying, "Power without kindness is like a drum without rhythm. It makes noise,
but it means nothing. He had built everything to honor her, to prove that poverty could be broken, that dignity could rise from dust. But now, as he watched these women laugh at a man they thought was beneath them, he saw what money had done. It had fed pride, not peace. It had built walls instead of bridges. As the laughter echoed through the hall, he smiled faintly. Not out of anger, but out of realization. They were blind, all of them, chasing comfort and forgetting the cost of their souls. For the first time, he didn't envy the rich. He pitied them. He had walked in their shoes, sat at their tables, and still, he found more truth in the quiet corners of servanthood than in the echo of applause.
Later that night, he sat outside by the servants' quarters, listening to the city hum in the distance. The other workers laughed softly among themselves, sharing a meal of rice and stew, passing the bowl without pride. One of them broke bread and handed him a piece. No one knew his name, yet they welcomed him as one of their own. It felt strange, the kind of warmth he hadn't felt in years. In that small moment, he saw what his billion had stolen from him, the human touch. But peace doesn't last long in a house built on secrets. As he walked back toward the mansion, he saw a light still burning in the madame's room. She was on the phone, pacing, whispering about an account, a transaction, and a name he thought he'd buried years ago. Then she said it, his real name, slow, certain, like someone who knew the truth all along. He froze in the hallway, the air thick around him. She turned slightly, glancing toward the door, as if sensing eyes watching her. If she knew who he really was, why was she pretending not to know? He stood in that dark hallway, the glow from her window flickering across the polished floor, his own reflection staring back at him in the tiles. His hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of knowing. She had said his name, his real name, the one no servant should know. He wanted to walk in, confront her, ask how long she had known, but something held him back. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was wisdom. Sometimes silence reveals more than words ever could. He thought of every insult she had thrown, every laugh that cut through him, every lie spoken in rooms where he once ruled. She had seen him mop her floor and still spoken his name. So what game was she playing? Was it loyalty in disguise or betrayal waiting for the right price? The walls of that mansion felt tighter now, like they too were hiding something. He moved quietly through the corridors, the same halls that once carried his power, now whispering with new meaning. For the first time, he wondered if he had come undercover to uncover others or himself. Tell me, if you were in his place, would you keep your silence or show your true face? If the people who once bowed before you now stepped on you, would you forgive them or would you make them feel what you felt? When power is in your hands again, would you use it to heal or to teach them a lesson they'll never forget? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know, if you were Adewale, would you reveal who you are or would you wait until every mask around you falls on its own? Days rolled into weeks, and the mansion carried on like a world of its own. Adewale walked among the servants, and in their laughter, he found something purer than the applause of his past life. He listened to their stories, the cook whose daughter was ill, the gardener who hadn't seen his family in years, the young maid who dreamed of going to school but couldn't afford the fees. He began to see what life looked like from the other side of power. One evening, he followed the maid to the back of the house. She was crying quietly, holding her phone close. Her son needed surgery and she was short on money. Adewale said nothing, but that night, he placed an envelope beneath her pillow. When she found it the next morning, she wept, thinking it was a miracle. He watched from afar, his heart heavy yet lighter than it had been in years. It was the first time he had given without expecting his name to be printed on a plaque. As the days passed, the madam grew colder. It seemed the more humble he became, the more she tried to break him. Once, she accused him of stealing perfume that cost less than one of his old neckties. He took the blame quietly just to keep the peace.
But every insult she threw built something inside him. Not pride, but clarity. Then came the day of the grand party. The mansion woke early with noise and color. The madame wanted to prove to her friends that she could host a gathering as grand as the billionaire who once lived there. She ordered new flowers, imported wine, and gold-rimmed plates. None of the guests knew that the man polishing those same plates was the very owner of the house they were walking into. That night, music filled the air, laughter spilled across the garden, and the madame shone like a queen in borrowed jewels. Adewale moved quietly among the crowd, pouring drinks, collecting plates, unnoticed as always, until a foreign investor entered, a man who had done business with Adewale in London years ago. Their eyes met across the room, a brief flicker of recognition, then silence. The investor froze for a heartbeat, but when the madame turned to introduce him, he smiled politely and said nothing. Later, the madame called for him loudly, scolding him in front of the guests for serving the wrong drink. The crowd watched, some embarrassed, others amused. "Maybe you should go back to the village," she said. "Housework is not for everyone." Laughter rippled through the room. He stood still, tray in hand, his eyes calm. The investor watched quietly, his face unreadable. As the night went on, the madame grew drunk on attention. She raised her glass and said, "If Chief Adewale was still alive, he would have been proud to see me run this place better than he ever did." The investor coughed softly, and everyone turned. "Alive?" he said. "My dear, Chief Adewale is not only alive, he is standing right beside you." The music stopped. Glasses froze mid-air. Every face turned to the man in the plain white uniform. He didn't move, didn't smile. For a moment, the only sound was the wind pushing against the curtains. Then he placed the tray down slowly and said, "I never left. I only watched." The room erupted. Phones came out. Whispers turned to gasps. The madame stepped back, her glass shattering at her feet. The investor bowed slightly, saying, "You've been among them all this time." Adewale looked around the hall, his eyes moving from one guilty face to another. "I wanted to see what pride does when no one is watching," he said. The madame dropped to her knees, words tumbling from her mouth, apologies, excuses, denials. He raised a hand to stop her. "No need," he said softly. "You taught me more than you know." He turned to the other staff, the ones who had treated him with kindness. "You will manage this house now. From today, no one here will serve out of fear." The guests stood frozen, guilt flooding the room like cold air. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply smiled, and that silence cut deeper than any anger ever could. But as he turned to leave, the investor stepped closer, his voice low. "Chief," he whispered, "you think you've seen all the betrayal, but there's one name you still haven't heard." Adewale's steps slowed. The crowd waited, watching. The investor leaned in. "The one who took your company isn't in the boardroom. They are still in this house." Who could still be hiding behind the walls he once called home? The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and silent. Every face in the room turned to Adewale, waiting for his reaction. But he said nothing. He only looked at the investor, eyes steady, calm as the ocean before a storm. The man's warning echoed in his mind long after the guests had left and the lights had dimmed. Someone else was still inside the house. Someone who had stolen more than his company. Someone who had stolen trust itself. In the days that followed, the truth began to unfold, piece by piece. Documents were recovered, accounts traced, phone calls exposed. The one pulling the strings wasn't the madame. It was someone quieter. Someone who had moved in shadows for years, his own lawyer. The man who had once sworn loyalty to him. He had been signing deals behind Adewale's back, transferring assets, feeding lies into the system that nearly buried him. He could have destroyed him with one call, but when the moment came, he didn't. He looked the man in the eyes and said, "If greed is what you learned from me, then I failed too." That day, Adewale realized that revenge doesn't clean a wound, It only deepens it.
The madam's fall was public. The same people who once praised her turned their backs. Reporters came, headlines screamed, but Adewale said nothing against her. He could have left her in shame, but instead, he asked her to meet him one last time. She came trembling, unable to speak. He told her he forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because he wanted peace. Her tears fell freely, and for the first time, she saw him not as a man of power, but as a man of grace. Months later, the mansion came alive again, but differently. Gone were the walls of pride and the whispers of fear. The staff worked with joy, not trembling hands. Adewale opened scholarships for their children, calling it the hands that build foundation. He wanted the world to know that greatness didn't come from birth or money, it came from character. He walked through the same hallways where he once mopped floors, now filled with laughter instead of gossip. The marble still shone, but it no longer reflected arrogance, it reflected gratitude. He had rebuilt his empire, not with gold or status, but with integrity. The city that once gossiped about his fall now spoke of his grace. Sometimes he would sit by the balcony at dusk, watching the sun fade over Lagos, remembering the boy who sold oranges on the roadside, the mother who believed in him, and the lesson that had taken a lifetime to learn. Wealth may buy obedience, but only humility earns respect. But one evening, as the sky turned red, he received a letter. No name, no address, just a sentence written in familiar handwriting. The person you forgave wasn't the only one who betrayed you. Who else had been playing the game while he thought it was over? He held the letter for a long time before opening it, his fingers tracing the edge as if it carried the weight of the past. The paper was simple, but the handwriting struck him. It was neat, careful, and familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. He unfolded it slowly, his eyes scanning the words that would shake the peace he had built. The person you forgave wasn't the only one who betrayed you. That was all it said. No name, no hint, just that single line, clean and cruel. He looked around the room, his heart calm but alert. The house was quiet, but now it felt different. Every sound, every shadow, every footstep in the distance carried new meaning. Who else had been close enough to know his secrets? Who had watched his fall and his rise and still chosen deceit? The following days, small things began to change. He noticed missing papers, whispers that stopped when he entered, and glances that lingered too long. Even among the people he had lifted up, there was tension in the air, a quiet fear of being discovered. Trust, once rebuilt, began to feel fragile again. Then one morning, a servant came to him holding another envelope, this one sealed with wax, no sender's name. Inside was a photograph, old and faded. It showed him years ago standing beside a young boy at an orphanage he once funded. On the back, in the same careful handwriting, were 6 words that turned his breath cold. He never forgot what you promised. He looked again at the boy's face, sharp eyes, quiet smile, something familiar in the way he stood. A memory stirred, a promise he had made to return for the child and never did. Could that boy be the one now watching from the shadows, grown, bitter and waiting for his moment? For the first time in a long while, Adewale felt that old pull of danger, the sense that a story he thought was finished was only beginning again. He folded the letter, his eyes fixed on the gates of the mansion where the evening light was slowly dying. Somewhere beyond those walls, someone was moving against him. If you were moved by this story, hit that like button and subscribe. We tell tales that prove one truth: power without humility is hollow. And next week, we open the next chapter of Chief Adewale's life, the secret that waited 20 years to return. Don't miss it.
The Billionaire's Secret Son.